Welcome. If you've ever snipped a piece off a plant, stuck it in some soil, and just crossed your fingers, you know that feeling when it actually works? It feels like actual magic. Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on that magic and get into the real science of how a simple stem can be commanded to grow an entirely new root system. So let's start with something you've probably seen all over social media, the garden hack that says to dip your plant cuttings in cinnamon to make them root. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's cheap, it's in your kitchen, it feels so natural. But we really have to ask the question, can a pinch of spice truly command a plant to grow roots? The short answer from a biochemistry perspective is a pretty firm no. While the idea is great, the science just doesn't back it up. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why this myth is so popular, what cinnamon actually does for your cuttings, and then we'll meet the real chemical architects that have the power to build roots right out of thin air. Okay, so first things first, let's give cinnamon its due. It's not totally useless here, not at all, but its role in all of this has been, well, completely misunderstood. Here's the deal. Cinnamon is your friend when you're taking cuttings, just not for the reason you think. Its real superpower is that it's a fantastic natural antifungal and antimicrobial. See, when you take a cutting, you're creating an open wound on the plant. It's basically a welcome mat for all sorts of nasty stuff like fungus and bacteria that cause rot. Cinnamon acts like a shield, protecting that wound so the cutting survives long enough to try and root. But here is the absolute key. Cinnamon offers protection. It doesn't give instructions. It has 0 hormones in it that can tell the plant, hey, it's time to build some roots.
And to really get this difference, I think the best way to visualize it is with a really simple analogy. Think of it as the architect versus the security guard.
Okay, imagine your plant cutting is a new construction site. Cinnamon is the security guard. Its job is to patrol the perimeter and keep out the vandals, the fungus and bacteria that could come in and wreck the whole project. And that's a super important job. But the security guard doesn't have the blueprints. He can't tell the crew what to build or how to build it. That's the architect's job. And in our story, the architect, the one with all the plans, is a powerful rooting hormone called an auxin. So now that we've kind of put the cinnamon myth to bed, it's time to meet the real chemical magicians, the ones truly responsible for all that amazing root growth, the auxins. And the story behind discovering these things is just a fantastic piece of science history. It all started way back in 1880 with, of all people, Charles Darwin. He noticed there was some kind of signal that made plants bend toward the light. For decades, other scientists built on his work, and eventually a guy named Fritz Wendt finally isolated this mystery chemical and gave it the name auxin, which comes from the Greek word to grow. Now, plants make their own version of this stuff, a natural auxin called IAA. It's the plant's internal messenger for all kinds of growth. But, and this is a big but for us gardeners, natural IAA has one huge weakness. It's incredibly fragile. The moment you expose it to light and air, it starts to break down. So it's just not very effective if you try to apply it from the outside. And this is where science gets really cool. Researchers created synthetic auxins, like the one you see here, IBA. By just slightly tweaking the chemical structure, they made a version that is way more stable, way more persistent. So instead of that fleeting natural signal that just vanishes, IBA delivers a sustained, powerful command that keeps telling the cutting cells, build roots for a much, much longer time. So, how in the world does this chemical command actually work? I mean, how does a little bit of powder or gel take a piece of a stem and convince it to completely change everything about itself? It all kicks off with this absolutely wild biological process called de-differentiation. It's basically a cellular reset button. The rooting hormone tells these mature, specialized stem cells to forget everything they know about being a stem cell. They stop doing their old job and become these amazing blank slates, ready to be totally reprogrammed for a brand new purpose. And here's how that reprogramming actually happens on a molecular level. Think of the cell's DNA like a huge library full of instruction manuals. Normally, there's a protein that acts like a brake, sitting on top of the root building manual, preventing it from being read. Well, IBA acts like a key. It slots into a special receptor, which then removes that brake. And boom, the genetic machinery is suddenly free to read the blueprints for creating roots, and this whole cascade of activity just explodes. And this whole beautiful process happens in 4 clear stages. First, you get that de-differentiation we talked about. The cells are reprogrammed. Second, they start dividing like crazy, forming a little cluster. Third, that cluster gets organized into a tiny, structured baby root called a primordium. And finally, stage 4, emergence. That new root literally pushes its way out through the stem and into the great wide world. Okay, this is all just incredible science, but what does it mean for you and me? How do we take all this knowledge from the laboratory and put it to work right in our own gardens?
Well, you'll find these synthetic auxins, rooting hormones, sold in a few different forms. The powders are probably what you're most familiar with. You just dip the end of the cutting right in. Gels are also fantastic because they really stick to the stem and give you a nice even coating. And then there are liquids, which are often used by the pros because you can get super precise control over the hormone concentration.
But, and this is so important, you can't just use any rooting product on any plant. The key is that the strength you need really depends on the type of cutting you're working with. As you can see here, soft green new stems, softwood, need a much lower concentration. Older, woody hardwood cuttings need a much stronger dose. If you use a product that's too strong, you can actually burn the cutting, so matching the hormone to the plant is absolutely critical. And what happens when you get it right? Well, the results are just staggering. For tons of different plants, using the correct rooting hormone at the correct concentration can boost your success rate to well over 90%. That is the difference between just hoping for the best and getting reliable, predictable, amazing results every single time. So, the takeaway here is pretty simple. Using the right science means more of your cuttings will actually root. They'll root faster, they'll develop stronger, healthier, more fibrous root systems. It just makes the whole process more consistent, and it even lets you successfully propagate plants that are famously difficult to get to root on their own. So, look how far we've come. We've gone from garden folklore to using precise biochemical commands. We now understand the exact signal that tells a single plant cell to completely change its destiny. And it really makes you wonder, right? If we can orchestrate the growth of roots with this level of pinpoint control, what other parts of a plant's life will we be able to command in the future?